Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of the Boxing Coalition. My name is Cam. Joining me tonight, Naota, aka Nelson, aka Nikki, aka Nelta. You probably got a few more in there as well, Naota.
Yeah, people don't know how to pronounce anything right, so I got about 20 different nicknames by now.
How are you? You well?
Yeah, I'm doing all right, man. Just trying to catch all these fights and enjoy them.
Yep. It's a shame that HBO once again went up against Showtime, but it's what it is. Still good fights. As boxing fans, we've got some good things to talk about. Where do you want to start? HBO card or Showtime card?
I could go either way. I mean, I guess maybe it might as well start with the Showtime card because it was the bigger name card, so.
All right,
or the bigger spotlight anyway.
Yeah, especially with Frampton and Leo, the rematch. So let's start there. Your thoughts on the fight, but initially first your scorecard. How did you have it?
To me, I thought it was 9 rounds to 3 for Santa Cruz, and a lot of people are probably rolling their eyes right now, like, "Oh yeah, of course you scored it for Santa Cruz. You hate Frampton and this and that." But, honestly, I thought that he was just more effective this fight than he was the first one. I thought he won the first fight as well, so I don't think that should necessarily surprise too many people considering that. But it was basically, I think that he improved a little bit. I think that he kind of did what I said that he should do on, what was it, last week or 2 weeks ago show, where we were talking about the fact that he kind of bent down and he lowered himself to Frampton's level in terms of his height and his posture. And he was, kind of wide open for that straight 1-2, which is something that Frampton does extremely well. He's probably got one of the best 1-2s in the game.
Yeah, the left hook as well.
Exactly. And the thing is, this time he was able to work behind the jab and, keep distance. But not only that, but a lot of the times when he was able to rattle off combinations, he would finish off his combinations with a jab in order to reset himself and to reset Frampton back at distance. So even though he was able to even outfight him on the inside, from what I saw, he was also able to reset distance on the outside to keep Frampton from, getting kind of his mid-range hook on and being able to catch him with those, sharp and flashy shots. To me, I think the judges scored it closer because of the fact that, I think a lot of times people score Frampton's, the effort that he's putting into his shots. I think that he throws really hard, and because they're easy to see, they're, kind of these wide, flashy, snappy looking shots. A lot of people score them even if they don't necessarily land that cleanly, especially in comparison to a lot of what Santa Cruz's work was, which is a lot of, kind of shorter stuff on the inside and not necessarily looking like he's putting a whole hell of a lot on the punches, but when they land, I mean, you could tell that Frampton's feeling them, and you could see on his face, with the damage that he's accrued, that he definitely felt him in that sense as well. But, I don't think that it was an outright blowout or anything. I mean, Frampton was definitely very game throughout the entire fight, in spite of the fact that Santa Cruz started off a lot better in this fight, I think, whereas Frampton started faster in the first fight. I think it was just a case of Santa Cruz being just a step ahead of him the entire way throughout the fight. And in spite of the fact that Frampton started to come on a little bit in the mid-rounds, he was just a step behind for the most part.
Yeah, I kind of agree to most of what you said. I had it close. I had it a draw, but I think I was a bit favourable to Frampton in the swing rounds because there were awful lot of swing rounds in the fight. But going off the height thing, yeah, totally. In the first fight, Leo definitely gave up his height. He was kind of leaning forward, lunging in, and that left hook couldn't miss in the first fight. But this one, he used his height a bit more, as you said about that kind of final punch to reset himself. He was doing a lot of 1-2-1s and then getting Frampton away because Frampton does pull back in straight lines, and he was catching him with that kind of, final spear jab as he was going back. And Frampton disappointed me because he didn't really seem to adjust. One thing that I didn't think Leo could do is, have variations within rounds. So he may start the round off on the front foot going after Carl, but his output wasn't as high as it was in the first fight, so he wasn't getting caught in between shots like he was in the first fight, where he would kind of let his combinations go and then step off or step backwards or whatever, and then if he had a successful start of the round, he would then, go on the back foot, and then when his Frampton would come forward, Frampton was nowhere near as effective on the front foot. He neglected his jab. He just tried to kind of get close and work away, but unlike the first fight, his accuracy wasn't there either. It's like he was throwing for the sake of throwing. He wasn't really placing under the elbow or wherever, and that left hook wasn't there for him, because Leo wasn't leaning forward, he wasn't getting caught with his shots. He was still having a bit of success, but nowhere near as the first fight. And if you look overall, the confidence that Leo had throughout the fight was a lot different to Carl. Carl seemed frustrated in the majority of the fight, even in the corner work. Like, he was going back, like, did I win that one? And I don't know if Shane was playing games with it sometimes, because there were the rounds I thought he may have won, and Shane was saying he lost it. So I don't know if that was a bit of just kidology with his own fighter, but it was a decent fight. Nowhere near as good as the first one. Just the output level was a lot slower, so and not as much engagement. Like, the first one had so much engagement. Both guys were like having a firefight in the center of the ring. It had moments where it looked like it was going to start, but it kind of it didn't live up to the original. But it was a decent fight. Trilogy wise, Naota, I don't know, man. If they do have it in a couple of fights, go in a different direction, come back maybe next year or something and have the third fight. But I don't really want to see it again, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, I don't necessarily mind rematches, especially immediate rematches if the most previous fight was a very good one. But considering the fact that featherweight, is a pretty name-packed division, but the top fighters haven't necessarily fought each other the last few years. I'd like to see him mix it up a bit. I mean, Frampton versus Lee Selby and Leo Santa Cruz versus Adam Mars in a rematch might be, I think, a good way to go with regards to that, because you could have Frampton and Selby somewhere in the UK, whether it's Ireland or in Britain somewhere, Wales or something like that, and then with Santa Cruz and Mars, you could have the rematch back in LA again, if not Vegas, because I think Mars probably has a bit of a bigger fan base than Santa Cruz, because he had kind of just been able to generate just more fandom previous to Santa Cruz's kind of uprising in terms of name value. But I mean, I think either of those fights would be really good, especially with Frampton and Selby, because that's really a fresh matchup, a fresh clash of styles between the two of them. Selby would definitely bring a little bit more defensive-ness to the game, and we definitely see Frampton tested in a major way on his front foot in that type of a fight. With Mars Santa Cruz, I think Mars, is a smarter boxer than a lot of people give him credit for, so I could definitely see some potential adjustments in that fight as well. But I think that it wouldn't necessarily be any less of an action fight than the first fight. It might start slower, and Mars I'd imagine would probably be a bit more tentative, as opposed to just trying to break Leo's will the way he did in the first fight. But at the end of the day, I think with that particular clash of styles, there's almost always going to be a firefight at some point.
Featherweight is quickly becoming one of my favorites, because you can mix and match with so many people, and there's obviously the top guys there that you've just mentioned, but there's guys in kind of mid-level. So obviously Oscar Vargas is still up there. Warrington's on the cusp. Jojo Diaz, Quig's still there or thereabouts.
Gary Russell Jr. as a champion.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. So even Cuellar, even though you got kind of exposed by...
Cuellar's moving up. Cuellar's moving up to 130.
Oh, is he going up now?
Yeah. He's talking about how he was having trouble making weight before and during the Mars fight and everything. So let's say they're going to move him up next.
Even Jorge Lara, Jorge,
the monster, man. Like, they wound up canceling his fight at the last minute. I don't know. I guess his opponent pulled out or something. But he's the type of fighter that I'd imagine most guys are going to try to avoid unless he has a belt.
Yeah, unless you're Mando, you're not getting that. You're not getting the opportunity.
Yeah, he has that James Kirkland. I'm going to take your nuts, then I'm going to take your heart, take your whole soul away. He's coming to kill you.
Yep. So any final thoughts on the fight? Or any what matchups? I know you're saying about maybe Selby and Frampton. I don't know. I'd like to see Frampton and maybe Mares. I think would be good.
Yeah, I think that would be solid as well. The main reason why I mentioned Mars and Santa Cruz is because Mars is the regular WBA champion, and the WBA has their big title mess, and I want them to try and clean that up as soon as possible. I'm not sure if Floyd Mayweather was there specifically because he still wants to promote Mikey Garcia, but I know he promotes the interim WBA champion at featherweight, Carlos Zambrano, a fighter from Peru. He's supposed to be promoting him on an upcoming card pretty soon, so I'm sure he probably factors into that at some point as well. But I know like Oscar Valdez is gonna be fighting Miguel Mariaga pretty soon, which is a good fight. You know, a hard puncher, probably the hardest puncher, one of the hardest punchers in the division, and probably the hardest puncher that Valdez has faced so far. Gary Russell, I'm not exactly sure what he's doing in the near future. Oscar Escandon too. I wanted to mention him. You know, the first man to beat and stop Jesus Cuellar. You know, he definitely factors pretty big in the division. I wouldn't mind seeing him against any of these guys as well, even though he's not necessarily one of the bigger names. But Frampton versus Mars, I'd like. Frampton versus Russell, I'd like. Maybe Santa Cruz versus Selby. I wouldn't mind that either. You know, if you were to reverse the original matchups that I gave from beforehand. I wouldn't mind any of those fights really. And then you know Jojo Diaz is fighting Josh Warrington coming up soon. Winner becomes Mando for Gary Russell. So if Gary Russell was to fight one of these other big names before then, I think a lot of people would be a lot more hyped for that potential matchup in the future.
Totally agree. Yeah, just lastly on me, average fight. Both guys missed a lot. I tweeted that out after the fight, and a lot of people kind of agreed because people were replying to the tweet and favoring it and stuff. So, yeah,
I think it showed that Santa Cruz learned a little bit more from the first fight than Frampton did, because I think he kind of fought it at the pace that he wanted to fight it at. Even though a lot of people aren't prone necessarily to thinking of Santa Cruz as more of like a moderate tempo boxer, I think he showed, especially in this fight, that he can do so, you know, with pretty good acuity.
Yeah, and just lastly, I might be wrong, but just from the build-up interviews, quotes from Frampton, I think maybe went in there a bit too big-headed, and just because some of the things I read was like he was saying he hopes that Leo doesn't retire after he beats him the second time, and he thinks he'll beat Leo easier the second time and stuff like that. It just seems overconfidence for me. Maybe just
I did see a quote saying from Santa Cruz that if he lost again, he was going to retire. So I was actually pretty surprised to read that.
Oh, actually, I didn't hear that. I didn't see that.
Yeah, so that might have been what Frampton was going off of, potentially.
Most probably, yeah. That makes sense. All right, let's move on to the undercard, Naoto. Wow.
Yeah, I mean the undercard, but the show stealer, I'd say. The showstopper, the show stealer, the main thing that people are probably going to remember from this night.
Mikey's back.
Mikey's back, and he put Dejan Zlaticanin on his back. You know, he played him out. That might wind up being the knockout of the year. I mean, especially when you consider the brutality of it and the fact that it was at the highest level, you know, the world championship level, and against a guy that a lot of people were saying that Linares was like deathly afraid of. You know, Garcia made him look like a chump. He schooled him. It almost kind of reminded me of like Ronda Rousey versus Holly Holm. You know, it's like he schooled him and then he knocked him out, clean out. He was out unconscious for like 3 minutes. You know, it's like it doesn't get much nastier than that. He was out on his feet. He hit him with that final shot where he was looking away at the crowd, and it was ugly, man. It reminded me of David Tua versus John Ruiz.
Yeah.
You know, it's like he's already about to go down, and you hit him with that last shot for good measure. Ugly.
Awesome. But even before that, he was just using the jab so well. I don't even remember really Zlaticanin kind of landing a clean shot, because he was getting peppered with the jab, and anytime he would kind of leap in and try and throw that, you know, wild left hook or wild overhand left, he would just get countered by Mikey, man. Mikey was just taking half steps back, just countering him and looking so comfortable.
Garcia probably had sparring sessions harder than that during his camp.
No, it's true, because I thought he may struggle a bit early on, and you know, if he gets pushed back in the ropes, he might try and hold or anything. But I don't remember them being a clinch. Like Mikey was just like schooling him with the jab.
He set the pace really well. He kept his distance really well, and it seemed like as soon as he was able to land on Zlaticanin, that he really didn't want any part of him. You know, Dejan is the type of guy that to really crowd you and rough you up, bully you on the inside, like a Mike Tyson, you know. And Garcia, it's like as soon as he started hitting him, it was pretty much over. It was over as soon as like probably the first minute of the fight. And it's the thing with Garcia, it's not just the fact that he hits really hard, but he hits you with that excellent timing. So he's hitting you very hard and at that exact right moment in that exact right spot. And, you know, he's just doing damage with every shot that he throws.
Yeah, and like Dan was saying last week, I think he's probably got technique-wise, probably one of the best right hands. He just throws it so perfectly and just down the pipe. He gets full torque into the punch, man. It's just really good. And just that last combinations that ended it, do you think Zlaticanin was hurt mainly by the uppercut, and Or do you think that little kind of shot that cuffed him around the back, that kind of wobbled his senses, as Jim Watt would say?
Well, I mean, I'm sure that it pretty much accumulated, but I'd say that uppercut definitely did the beginning work. Like if he would have taken that uppercut and went down right then and there, I think he probably would have done a little bit of a Zab Judah, kind of fallen down again, then got back up and made the 8 count. But when it came to the follow up volley from Garcia, he pretty much put the nail in the coffin that Zlaticanin was not getting up from everything that he was hitting him with after the fact. But yeah, those cuffing shots, I think definitely added to the damage. And then that last right hand, which was almost like I don't even know what you could call it, like a hooking right cross, almost it was like a street fight punch. It's like you see something on like World Star Hip Hop or something. It's like a street fight punch and laid Zlaticanin clean out. And Dejan was really lucky that he landed on his shoulder instead of his head, because you could see like his head like almost bounced and almost hit the canvas, but he was probably had like an inch of leeway. But yeah, I mean, because especially considering the fact that he was completely out cold, and luckily for everybody, it seems like he's in good health. They did some scans on him. They found no injuries after the fact and everything, like no bleeds or anything. So I mean, it looks like he'll be good to go, at least in terms of like overall health. Not necessarily sure about his actual boxing career though.
No, that is good to hear. And initially I was like, oh shit, what a knockout, and I was like on Twitter saying iced, #iced and all this, but then when he wasn't moving I thought, I feel a bit of a dick now, because like there was a long period where obviously he was being tended to and he didn't even move, obviously, but when he got up and he seemed to be okay, and I was relieved. But yeah, amazing KO. And yeah, there's going to have to be some really good knockouts throughout the rest of the year to compete with that for knockout of the year.
Definitely. I mean, it was ugly. And like I said before, it's at the top level. You can't really ask for much more than such a brutal, it's like a heavyweight style knockout. It's something that people would expect from, 200 plus pounders, and you're getting it at lightweight. So Mikey Garcia is bringing the pain, bringing the punishment. And based off of that performance, honestly, I'd favor him over everybody at lightweight or below. I don't see anybody touching him until he gets to 140.
Yeah, he's the lightweight king already, man.
Yeah.
No one. But just quickly, Robert Garcia, you have to give him a quick mention. I like the way, once Dejan Zlaticanin did get up and quickly he was helping his team, remove his gloves, so he could get more circulation around the body and get blood back to his brain. So that was a nice little gesture, man. Like, you didn't have to do that. And the same caring family, was it their father trained Fernando?
Yeah. Their father, Eduardo Big G. A lot of people know him as Big G from the Eli Sekbag videos. Eduardo Garcia, but yeah, he trained Fernando Vargas amongst other fighters. And he's one of those guys that he's probably got one of the best brains in boxing in terms of being able to train people. Even though he's pretty much semi-retired, he only trains Mikey nowadays. But like even Robert would talk about the fact that when he was younger and he was being trained by their dad, that he hated training because their dad was so strict, and he worked them out like he built them into warriors basically. He didn't let them have breaks and shit like that. No, he made them into old school style fighters.
It's weird you say that though, because even my coach at gym, he might give the rest of us a pass, but if any of his kids are in the session, he's like triple hard on his own kids, and it's like sometimes you think, right, man, calm down, man. That's your kids right there. But yes, it's like he put some extra work. Like he knows they're capable of more, so you don't let him rest on the laurels, which is interesting. But I guess that does give you that extra little step ahead of the next man, because that you get worked harder than everyone else. So
yeah, it's like that tough love mixed with the fact that they're like a lot of times parents still know their own kids as well, so they know exactly how to push them and when and why. There's certain exceptions to that. I mean, Roy Jones Jr. could probably tell you a lot about that with his dad, but I'd say by and large, it tends to be more for the positive than the negative.
Yep. All right. Unless you got anything else, we'll move on to the rest of the undercard. For me, I only really saw Sky only shown the Josh Taylor fight and the David Benavidez fight. So, do you want to start with the David Benavidez? Not much to see.
Yeah. I mean, David Benavidez was fighting a heavily overmatched opponent. Won very easily. I mean, he still has, a 95 or something like that % knockout ratio. His opponent was a guy that probably should be competing at light middleweight in spite of the fact that he's one of these guys that seems like a journeyman that takes fights on short notice, basically, at super middleweight. He's basically fighting at his walk-around weight, considering the fact that Benavidez outweighed him by 14 pounds on fight night. Benavidez, at least for his worth, though, he looked a lot leaner than I've seen him in the past. He tended to look pretty flabby in the last couple of years. But, he's 20 now. He's getting into his man strength and all that. And, he may even become a light heavyweight within the next year or two or something like that. He's really tall. He's like 6'3", which is, pretty tall for a super middleweight. But he's really good. I think he's better than his brother Jose. His older brother that was a world champion down at 140, had the robbery basically against Mauricio Herrera. But Benavidez took care of business, knocked this guy out, Mamajinov, in 2 rounds. And I really think it's a matter of they're having a tough time getting fights for Benavidez because he's tall, he's awkward, he's a really good boxer, and he has a ton of power. I think it's 15 knockouts in 16 fights or 16 knockouts in 17 fights, something like that. But I think he's going to be a difficult fighter in the next couple of years as super middleweight and light heavyweight. Whenever they decide to step him up for it. Honestly, I would probably pick him over that Taran Zuj, the guy from
Germany.
From Germany. That's the WBA champion right now. I'm sure they'll probably season him probably for another year before they step him up to a world championship fight. Because at that point, then there's really not as many tune-ups like that. But I think in terms of actual ability and skill set, I think he's pretty much ready.
I think this is the second time I've seen him, and there were things that I was really impressed with. The way he sets up that left hook to the body, beautiful. Definitely power in both hands as well. He caught dude, I think, for the first knockdown with a kind of short right hand. I can't remember, was it short left hand or right hand? And he kind of just collapsed from the power of it. And the second one was a left hook to the body, left hook to the head, just dropped him. And overmatched his opponent. He didn't really want to be there afterwards. He kind of quit. He was tiny as well compared to Benavidez. Yeah, Benavidez is very big. Negatives, he looks a bit stiff, man. Not much head and upper body movement. And you could say, well, look who he's fighting. But, you have to start implementing some of that stuff early because then it becomes second nature. If you're stiff for 15, 16 fights, then it's a bad habit to get out of. Then it's really difficult to change your ways. But
that's one of the things where he is kind of similar to his brother. His brother fights a lot that way too. I think the main difference is the fact that I think his conditioning is better, and he doesn't cut so much weight, so he's not killing himself, and he does. So that's why he doesn't lay on the ropes the way that Jose does, for instance.
Yep. But yeah, definitely Sky obviously covered this card on Sky Sports. Carl Froch and Adam Smith on the commentary, and they're just saying, this guy's very similar to Callum Smith, and Callum. It's like they use any opportunity to big up someone that they've got on their side. So there are similarities though, because they both throw a very similar left hook to the body. Both tall, but big dudes. Don't know how they make that weight, to be honest, but. Callum is a bit further, as they were saying, down the line. But yeah, Benavidez, if they can find guys, to go rounds with him and get him, it's the rounds. You need the rounds, isn't it, Naota? If you don't get rounds early, it has a really negative effect, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. A lot of times guys can get a little bit too used to blowing guys out of there early on, and that can definitely work against you if you're not able to get in some good hard rounds against somebody who's either defensively responsible or is rugged and that can kind of push you physically. And so you get used to, those hard fights, because once you get to the top level, every fight is a hard fight, or, at a certain moment anyway. The Badu Jack is a hard fight. Gilberto Ramirez is a hard fight, not just in terms of technical ability, but in terms of just physical ability as well. Porky Medina is a hard fight. So even at super middleweight, where a lot of people tend to slag off a lot of the top names there, there's some pretty solid fighters to be had. George Grove's still out there, the Durrell brothers, etc.
Yep. All right, let's move on. The Josh Taylor fight, the 8-rounder, kind of got bumped up because of the Lee Selby opponent situation, but we'll discuss that in a minute. I know I spoke to you at the time, and Leon said it as well, that they thought Josh Taylor's performance was a bit underwhelming. Do you want to expand on that, Nato?
Yeah, I thought it was very underwhelming. Honestly, like I thought that the fight could have probably been a draw with him and Alfonso Oliveira, his opponent. Is it really interesting? I saw Oliveira was from Tucson, Arizona, which is where Salido's from, and he has some of that craft that Salido has. He's a taller guy with long arms, so he actually, in spite of the fact that he had looked like he had a height and reach advantage over Taylor, he actually did a lot of really good inside fighting and good body work against Taylor. Taylor was able to stun him on a couple occasions, and I think he was able to kind of catch the judge's eyes with the flashier shots, and that's the reason why the scorecards were so wide. I didn't think that they should have been that wide, though. To me, like, if anything, Taylor probably inched out a close decision. But Oliveira, I think, is one of those guys that, in spite of the fact that he doesn't have a nice-looking record, he's a tough guy that learned probably the hard way on the job. Probably has, a side job and everything, and he probably being near where Salido's at, he probably, learned some pretty crafty techniques from him. So in spite of the fact that I think they probably thought that Taylor was just going to roll over Oliveira the same way that, say, like another prospect like Ryan Carl did, for instance, he beat him fairly handily. I think that it was a tough test for Taylor, but I think it was a learning experience for him as well. This was the first time he had gone the distance with anybody, even though it was only the 8th round distance. He had never gone beyond 5 before, and he was fighting against a guy that was digging to the body. Taylor was able to take the shots fairly well, in spite of the fact that Oliveira isn't, he's not like a knockout puncher or anything, but, you could tell that he was putting a lot of effort into his shots. And Taylor managed to come through and pull through and get the W. So in spite of the fact that it's probably an L for Taylor insofar as fanfare goes, because he kind of struggled with, what amounts to a journeyman in most people's eyes. I think it was a good learning experience for him.
Yeah, I kind of differ in your opinion. I had Josh winning quite comfortably. I thought his, output was a lot more than Oliveira's. Oliveira, though, he got a hell of a chin, and his wingspan was massive, because as I was watching it now, a lot of the punches looked like they were going a bit south, and I know he was warned for it and deducted a point as well. It's because, if you look at his reach on BoxRec, they had his reach at 73 inches, man, compared to Josh Taylor's 69.5. So this dude, when he had his guard up, man, his whole head, his whole body was covered, man. There was nowhere really to hit, and even though Josh was still picking his body shots a bit, some were straying a bit low, but I don't think it was too bad of a performance. The only thing I would say maybe is he was lunging a bit with the left hand, the lead left hand. He was trying to just throw it a bit too often without setting it up with a jab. But I thought his output was good, and he switched a few times. He went to orthodox, and he did it shift as well when he was going backwards. He shifted into orthodox and caught a dude with a nice left hook from this orthodox stance. But overall, I don't think he's got anything to be ashamed about. I seen him in an interview afterwards, and he said he was a bit disappointed with his performance as well. Maybe he was trying to load up a bit too much early on as well. But like you said, it's experience. It's better to have these type of fights now. Go to 8 rounds, get them under your belt, go against a guy that's not just going to fall over, and then it sets you up better when you go for titles. And I know he's already won a Commonwealth title, but he's, like you said, he's never been beyond those rounds now, and he's got 8 under the belt, and see how he goes from now on. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, I think all of his fights previous to this one, he was able to, if not knock a guy out just early on within the first 2 rounds, he was able to at the very least intimidate them. With Oliveira, he didn't have a guy that was intimidated by his power. He had a guy that was really going to throw back every time that he threw. He had to answer back for everything. So I think, like I said before, good learning experience for him, and I'm sure that he'll probably take that into the future, especially if he fights another swarmer like that.
Yeah, exactly. Just quickly, I was pretty pissed off with Sky. I've seen, Ivan Redkach before, but instead of showing his fight or highlights of his fight, during a big gap in between fights, they decided to show, start of round 5 from the Thomas Delorme fight from 2 weeks ago. It's like, well, why the fuck are you doing that? No one wants it. First of all, it wasn't a great fight. Second of all, why are you going from round 5?
Yeah, that's crazy. That's weird.
Weird
I mean, I'd imagine they could have fit, the Redkach versus Brock fight in there. But Redkach, honestly, to me, I didn't think looked all that great either. I thought that Brock was giving him some trouble. Redcatch managed to pull through and everything. Damon Brock, he almost kind of looked like Ishai Smith, and they had like the same style beard and everything. He had like a big like Mr. T chain as they were doing the ring announcements and stuff too. I liked that. But yeah, I mean he gave Redcatch some trouble. Redcatch, it seemed like he felt like Brock was going to be an easier opponent than he expected. And he, at first, he was really going all out in order to try and like score some kind of impressive knockout against Brock. But Brock, I think, kind of similar to Oliveira, is one of these guys that has, kind of an upside down record, has a few losses on his ledger that probably makes people think that he's just going to be some easy walkover. And he gave Redcatch a few different things to think about, just in terms of, his head movement, his defensive movement, as he was actually coming forward at Redcatch, because he was a little bit shorter than him. Redcatch eventually was able to stop him in the 8th. He was able to eventually wear him down. But I'd say probably from rounds 2 through 4 in particular, he was giving Redcatch a lot of trouble. So with Redcatch, he's kind of failed against a couple of the guys at probably that B level, Zlaticanin and Tevin Farmer. So it's hard for me to really see a great amount of upside in terms of his future. But I think he'll be a guy that probably we'll see in a couple of fun fights here and there. It might wind up being a stepping stone for like another prospect or something.
Yeah. Just lastly on Sky, my boy Scorsese is probably going to listen to this when he takes his dog for a walk. But I'm a big fan of Frotch because obviously Scores is from Nottingham, hometown of Frotch. But I was a fan of him as a boxer. He was a warrior. But fucking hell, commentary wise, it should not the Cobra Frotch. It's like the 10-10 Frotch because he just seems to just give 10-10 rounds just willy-nilly just because he can't be bothered to pick a fighter or he doesn't want to, I don't know, upset anyone or something. But, come on, you have to start picking rounds here. Okay, this guy won it for this reason. No, it was a close round, so I'll give it a 10-10. No, Frotch, come on.
Yeah, it's like he's trying to be politically correct to his fellow fighters and stuff.
Fuck that shit. You you can't do that anymore. If you're a boxer, fair enough, but now you're a pundit, now you're a broadcaster, you have to be a bit more independent now.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, even a lot of fighters, they tend to, they'll put on Twitter like, oh no, so and so won this fight and all kinds of stuff. A lot of active fighters, even guys that are completely in different weight classes from the guys fighting. So they have no financial interest in the winner or anything. It's just they're calling it how they see it. Like guys like Shane Mosley, for instance, watches a lot of fights, and he'll pretty much call it how he sees it. So I think Frotch should probably be a little bit more honest about who he's thinking is actually winning the rounds and such.
Yep. All right, let's move on. HBO more or less broadcast at the same time. I got 3 fights in the UK. We'll probably go through them all. You may have got more, Naoto. I don't know if you got anything else, but start at the headline. Francisco Vargas versus is it Miguel Berchelt?
Miguel Berchelt.
Yep. Pretty decent fight, Naoto.
Yeah, I mean, decent fight, but I think an even more than decent performance for Berchelt. I was, probably the only one online or one of maybe a couple because I didn't necessarily hear too many other people speaking about Berchelt, especially with how he got screwed over last year. He was the mandatory for Roman Martinez. He was the mandatory for Vasily Lomachenko, was never able to get that shot at the full WBO title. They made him the interim champion. And Francisco Vargas, props to him and Golden Boy, managed to give this guy a shot. I think they made a very big miscalculation considering the fact that they really didn't have to fight this guy, considering how big of a puncher he was. But I think they were thinking that this was just going to be too big of a step up from his previous fights. He had never fought at that level before. And even I, in spite of the fact that I favored him in going into the fight, I kind of questioned exactly how he was going to adjust, especially to the straighter, sharper shots of Francisco Vargas. Kind of like I mentioned earlier with Carl Frampton, I think he has a really sharp one too. And once he works behind that, it's very, very difficult to beat Vargas, especially. But something that Berchelt did really well was just he was able to vary up his combinations. And similar to what SantaCruz did against Frampton, he would often finish his combinations with jabs. And just the overall power of Berchelt seemed to really do serious damage to Vargas in such a way that Berchelt wasn't terribly bothered with a lot of what Vargas was throwing back at him. So even though Vargas was able to catch him clean here and there, I think that Berchelt's overall punch variety and especially his power made the clear difference in this fight. He had pretty much outside of the straight 1-2 up the middle, he had every conceivable advantage you could think of. He was bigger, he was stronger, he was faster. Well, I mean bigger in a certain sense of like he was strong. He was physically he had more presence there. And because Vargas actually outweighed him on fight night. But he had heavier hands. He was hitting them with multiple combinations. He was just a little bit more fluid with those combinations, both on the inside and even coming in from the outside. I think he had better footwork than Vargas as well. And I mean, he just kind of slowly overwhelmed them. I don't know how the judges had it as close as they did. One of the judges had it a draw going into the round where they stopped it, and then the other two judges had Berchelt winning by 2 points. To me, this was damn near a wash. I gave Vargas 2 rounds out of about 10 that they had gone before the stoppage.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, I thought that Berchelt pretty much emerged as a new top name at 130 pounds. I'd give him a solid chance against anybody there, including Lomachenko, including Cesar Corrales. Albeit, those type of fights are going to be very different from a Francisco Vargas, who Vargas tends to be a bit more of a textbook, straight up and down type fighter, as opposed to Corrales and Lomachenko, who tend to run a lot of the red lights, break a lot of the rules, and kind of create their own styles of boxing as they go along. But I think Berchelt has a little bit of that too, and I think that he utilized quite a bit of that against Vargas. And not only that, but with the amount of power that he has, I think if he lands on you, good luck taking that shot, because he has serious hands. And Vargas looked like he was rocked from the very first clean shot that Berchelt hit him with, and that pretty much changed the entire fight as soon as it happened.
Yeah, you were kind of spot on last week, man. Berchelt impressed me. His straight punches are excellent, like the 1-2, at kind of distance, and then he steps in, left hook to the body's beautiful. Short right hook is nice, and I thought, I questioned it last week, maybe in the later rounds he might, struggle a bit. I think he did take a few of the mid ones off a bit because his pace did slow, but overall his output was excellent. Vargas, Vargas is frustrating for me because I love his volume, I love his kind of come forwardness, but just technique-wise, I don't think he throws a proper punch, man. Like his best punch is probably his jab, because after that, his straight is always looped a bit. The body punches and the hooks, he doesn't really get much talking to him. They are mostly arm punches, and you kind of see that because he didn't really affect Berchelt at all, man.
Yeah, he kind of pushes him more than he snaps him.
Yeah, and he comes forward and he puts the pressure on.
I think that's gone worse with time, actually, too, as a matter of fact.
That's gone worse
because
with
I
taking
think that
beatings.
he used to snap him a little bit more.
Yeah, that's fair, but I think that's gone worse with him just taking beatings.
Yeah, well, and like I said, I think it might have been a miscalculation on Golden Boy's behalf, because, I mean, why are you going to put this guy against Takashi Miura, a murderous puncher, Orlando Salido, just a brutal fighter in general, and then Miguel Berchelt, who might wind up being the hardest puncher at the entire weight class, regardless of how heralded or not he is. That's it's like, okay, we're going to put you in nothing but fight of the year candidates. Well, you're not going to have very many of them because you're not going to probably last more than 2 years.
Exactly, you're going to be washed up soon. But just quickly on that point, Naota, because I had on Box Nation, they picked up the fight. We had an international feed which was commentated by Doug Fisher and Beto Duran, I think his name is.
Okay, yeah.
And they were saying that this was a mandatory for the WBC.
Really?
Yeah, that's what
odd.
they said. This was a mandatory, and the undercard with Miura, that was basically whoever wins that gets this guy. So that's how they had it planned out.
I don't think it was a WBC mandatory. If anything, that was like an in-house Golden Boy thing, where it's like they wanted the winners to fight the winners. Because as far as I understood it, Takashi Miura was the number 1 and Miguel Roman was the number 2. I'm looking at the ratings right now. Miguel Berchelt is rated at number 7 in the WBC, and that actually is surprising because, like I said before, he was the interim WBO champion. He just gave up that belt in order to probably get rated with the WBC in order to get this fight with Vargas. But yeah, as far as I understood it, he was in no mandatory position at all because he never fought any kind of eliminator. He was a champion for a rival organization. So, if anything, that would have disqualified him outside of, when they decide to take voluntaries, which to me, this pretty much was. But it was a really bad miscalculation as far as I'm concerned. I think they probably could have fought any number of other guys that were just ranked in the WBC and then fought Miura after the fact. Which I think probably was the plan. They probably felt like Vargas was going to beat Berchelt, and then they could have held something over like Bob Arum's head, and the fact that they had to basically pay Berchelt step-aside money twice in order to to keep him from fighting either Martinez or Lomachenko.
Do you think Golden Boy would have got some type of options on Berchelt so they'll be able to negotiate his next fight?
I'm hoping they did, but I'm really not sure if they actually did. I'm really not sure.
Who's his promoter? Is his promoter a biggish promoter in Mexico?
I'm trying to remember because I remember seeing it before on occasion. I'll look it up really quickly. But I mean, it's a fairly big promoter because I know he's appeared on Televisa a couple of times. I think it was Televisa. It was either Televisa or Azteca, one of the two big networks. So it's Channel 5 and Channel 7 in Mexico. In any case, but let me see if I can find it. Kill some time while I try to find this.
No problem. Yeah, good fight overall. Really impressed with Berchelt. As opponent next, he'll probably go back to Mexico. If WBC do try and maybe impose this fight with Miura, maybe they'll try and get just a come home fight. And
he's with Zanfer. So yeah, he's with a big promoter. Zanfer is probably the biggest promoter in Mexico.
That's interesting. So yeah.
And Zanfer tends to they are willing to work with pretty much anybody. They've worked with PBC, they've worked with Top Rank, they've worked with Golden Boy. So I'd be willing to bet that Golden Boy probably wound up not getting any options on him, considering that.
So we can expect Berchelt versus Gervonta Davis now.
Yeah, I would. To me, that's probably fight of the year candidate level stuff. That'd be excellent.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on down the bill. The Miura fight we were mentioning earlier. I talked to you off air just before we started. I watched this fight after the fact, and a lot of people had commented on, social media and stuff, saying, it was a great fight, a war, 2 worries and all that. I just thought it was a bit sloppy, man. It was decent, but Miura is all left hand, man. Everything is just basically for that left hand. Sometimes he kind of flicks the jab out, but it's just a rangefinder for the left. And his right hook to the body is pretty poor. It's like he doesn't try and place it, doesn't try and put it under the elbow. He just throws it for the sake of throwing it, just to kind of end his combination on a hook. Yeah.
Well, I'd say the right hook to the body is solid, but the right hook to the head tends to be the poor shot.
To me, the right hook to the body is terrible, and the one to the head is even worse.
Well, I mean, I think it kind of looks bad, but I think it does damage, because I think Miguel Roman definitely felt the overall damage. It's thrown in a weird way that you probably wouldn't want to teach anybody when they're learning to box, but I mean, he does it and it works for him. And, that left hand is just nasty. One of the nastiest left hands in the business, probably. But yeah, I mean, even Jim Lampley said it on the broadcast. When the main event came on between Berchelt and Vargas, he was talking about the fact that the two of them had quicker hands and quicker feet than Miura and Roman. And it was noticeable because Miura and Roman, they almost looked like kind of plotting heavyweights in there in the way that they were kind of fighting. It was more like kind of one shot at a time or a couple of shots at a time, and really more fighting in spurts as opposed to sustained, like tit for tat, I combo, you combo, I'm countering your counters, and then you're countering mine type of action. It was really like Miura loading up on heavy power shots, and Miguel Roman trying to pretty much answer in kind in certain spurts. But it was pretty much usually either one guy was throwing or the other one was throwing. There wasn't necessarily a whole lot of extremely incredible, like memorable exchanges. It was really like Miura probably won the first couple of rounds, Roman probably swept the next 3, and then Miura came back, kind of caught a second wind and slowly broke slowly broke Roman down and eventually stopped him. Dropped him once in the 10th, once in the 11th, once in the 12th, and that was all there was to it in the final round. So, I mean, a nice showing for Miura in terms of just showing that he was still a viable fighter at 130, even if not necessarily at the elite of the elite level. I mean, if anything, the overall wars, and especially that one with Vargas, might have taken their toll on him as well. And I'm not necessarily certain about his future prospects in terms of succeeding at that highest level the way that he had kind of reigned there for the last few years up until the Vargas fight.
Yeah, you're totally right about early on. Like, Miura wasn't putting punches together. He was kind of like flick the jab and then left hand, flick the jab, left hand. That was it. Right hook in there sometimes. But later on, I think there was one round, was it the 7th, where he kind of just went all out. He was loading up, throwing loads of punches, but like they were getting caught on gloves and he was missing quite a bit. And his balance is pretty bad as well, man. Like he loads up so much that if he misses or partially connects, then he's off balance and he has to reset his feet. But he definitely came on stronger late in the fight, which obviously helped him take it, because Roman did slow down and his feet definitely slowed. He was standing there rather than moving as he was initially doing, and it's just, I think the accumulation started getting to him. But it was a decent fight, man. It wasn't too bad, and I think Miura and Berchelt will be a good fight. It'll be a bit of a war. I think Miura will probably get taken out, to be honest, but for the few rounds it lasts, I think it'll be a fun fight. But yeah, overall decent.
Yeah, I mean, solid fight. I'd definitely favor Berchelt over Miura if HBO is willing to bring Berchelt back on the air. I think that they should. You know, I think a new like semi-star at the very least was born, and him versus Miura would be a solid fight. I definitely favor him over him though. I think that he has faster hands, and I think honestly he probably hits harder than Miura and takes a punch better than him as well. He pretty much, even when Vargas was able to hit him with clean shots that rocked Miura, Berchelt pretty much just walked through him and hit him right back. You know, he had almost a little bit of that Margarito to him, but with probably a smoother skill set and faster hands. So I think he's going to be a serious problem.
Definitely. And did you guys in the States get the Saddam Ali fight?
On Golden Boy. That's one of the great things. You know, Golden Boy, they show their undercards on YouTube. I love it. I really wish more promoters would do it, and especially wish promoters, when they're promoting fights outside of the U.S. or, worldwide, internationally, etc., would stream their fights on YouTube. Just put some ads on it. They can monetize fights that they otherwise wouldn't be collecting revenue outside of their home country or what have you. But yeah, Saddam Ali looked a little bit better in this fight than he had in his previous one. I was actually pretty unimpressed with the fight that he had last against Corral, I think the guy's name was. But this fight, he pretty much smoked Silva. This guy was a step back in competition, probably to get Ali some confidence back. But Ali did what you're supposed to do with basically a tomato can. Got him up out of there pretty damn quickly, and I mean he looked fairly solid. But it's really tough to tell, because I think that Jesse Vargas loss shattered a lot of his confidence. And it's not just the fact that he lost, but his first loss was a knockout loss, and his first was a pretty brutal knockout loss in the way that he kind of got picked apart and then KO'd. But I mean, I do think that he can still recover. I think that he has a lot of natural talents to him. He just needs to clean up some certain things where I think he was getting by on athleticism and agility before. He just needs to technically advance a little bit, study some tape, and just improve from there.
Yeah, he looked decent against kind of mismatched opponent, but that knockout was nasty, man.
Yeah.
What made it funnier as well, the fact that the dude whose name Jorge Silva, he was kind of gesturing to him like, yeah, come on, that didn't hit me there. And then as he was gesturing, he kind of dropped his hands, and then Ali thought, fuck this, threw a lead right hand, kind of caught him partially, and then threw that left hook that kind of went across his face, but he was out on his feet and then landed face first. Ali tried to kind of throw a punch as he was falling down, but didn't really need to. And yeah, it was a bit of we were having some nice KOs at the start of the year, Naota, man. What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, with Ali, I think you could see it coming a little bit more because his opponent was definitely overmatched. But, like you said, it's always good to see knockouts, and it's especially good to see guys getting guys out of there when they're overmatched. If your opponent's overmatched, get rid of them. A lot of people tend to be real snobs about fighters who are real defensively sound. Well, I mean, I don't think there's too many things more defensively sound than knocking your opponent the fuck out and preventing him from hitting you any further.
Yep, exactly. All right, that's about that card done. I know there was a card in China you and me were kind of talking off air about. It was Carlos Takan was on there. He kind of scored a brutal knockout as well. I
Yeah,
saw that.
his was pretty nasty also.
It was a
That
bit
was
like
ugly.
Garcia's, where the guy was turned and he kind of just got caught with a big shot as he didn't see it coming. Pretty nasty, man.
Yeah, very similar. It was just, he was hurt badly, follow up volley, boom, out of there. But yeah, the main headliner on that card, I saw a video of it, even though it wasn't the greatest video, and I told you about that before the show. But once I get a crisper, in HD version of the video,
HD.
I'll definitely put it out there for you and everybody else. But Ancas, he's the IBF super flyweight champion, fighter from the Philippines, ostensibly. In spite of the fact that he was fighting in Macau, China, fighting a fighter from Mexico, Jose Alfredo Rodriguez, who himself was a former interim champion at 108 pounds. So this is a guy that kind of failed at the top level previously, got knocked out by Kazuto Ioka. So this was basically a stay busy fight for Ancas. But, he did what you're supposed to do and stay busy, got his guy out of there in 8 rounds. It didn't have too much trouble with him. I think Ancas is a pretty solid fighter. I think him versus somebody like Kalya Fai, if they were to unify, would be a pretty solid, fairly evenly matched fight. Good southpaw, fairly tall, 5'6". Utilizes range well. Like a lot of fighters from the Philippines, especially nowadays, seems to have been very much inspired by Manny Pacquiao's kind of in and out ambush attack with power shot style. He's a pretty difficult fighter to handle. He managed to beat McJoe Arroyo pretty handily, and I think he's a solid fighter. I'd love to also see him against somebody like Juan Francisco Estrada, who especially seems to be having trouble getting a big fight at the 115-pound division. So I think if Estrada wants to get his name really stamped back in the division and potentially get the big money fights with Chocolatito, with Cuadras, with Inoue, etc., with Yafai even, he should go after German Ancas, And he's fought in China before. He fought Brian Valoria over there, and he did it big time. And he's definitely not one to shy away from tough matchups. He even called Carlos Cuadras in order to become the mandatory for Roman Gonzalez before too. So Ancas did a solid job, and I definitely want to see him back fighting against an elite level opponent. And I think that somebody like Estrada would be fantastic.
Excellent. All right, Neota. People listening may have noticed that you emphasized the word H, because Chemo always seems to make fun of me because he says the way I say HD or HBO, I really emphasize the H. And also he says I say uppercut really funnily, so that one's for you, Chemo. I said I'd say uppercut for you on the next show, so there you go. All right. Anything else you want to talk about fight-wise, or should we just go into some news that's kind of appeared over the last week since the last show?
Fight-wise, I can't necessarily think of anything that we might have missed. Just go ahead and go into the news.
The biggest one I saw today was Gerald Washington replacing, is it the Polish opponent? Or
Andrzej Warwicz, I think is somewhat how you pronounce it.
I'm glad that you made the effort, because I was going to mess that up.
It's something like that, Warwicz, or something along those lines. I probably messed up the pronunciation of the K or something. But honestly, I think this is a step up. I think Gerald, I personally have probably thought higher of Gerald Washington than most people. He pretty much schooled Eddie Chambers completely off the back foot. One of these guys that kind of came late to boxing. But I think he's done a fairly solid job for himself overall. I think that he's a level above the likes of like Dominic Brazil, who a lot of people were kind of putting him like on equal footing with. And really outside of Deontay Wilder, I think he's probably one of the higher level American heavyweights, really, like probably up there with like Jarrell Miller and like the aforementioned Brazil. Although I think that he's a better boxer than Brazil. I think that he can provide quite a bit of difficulty for Wilder because I think he's a little bit slicker than Wilder. I think his overall technique is cleaner than Wilder's. The main thing that he lacks versus Deontay though is the power and that physical nature of really being able to manhandle you. Although, as has been mentioned a number of times before, he was a USC football player. And considering that he has that background, I think if Wilder was to try and get rough on the inside with him, if anything, I'd probably favor Washington to win that inside battle. Really, it's going to be a matter of him being able to try and either be all the way on the inside and bully Wilder, or be able to try and be slick on the outside and negate Wilder's jab and that nasty right hand that he's thrown over the top. But the thing is, Wilder is sloppy enough with those punches, especially the right hand, that I think that Washington can give him quite a bit of trouble. I mean, I could very well see this being almost like an Arislan Lara versus Canelo Alvarez type of fight where Washington really spoils the hell out of Wilder and, makes him look bad regardless of whether Wilder wins or not.
I don't know. I've seen Gerald a few times, and one issue I noticed, especially against the Amemisu fight, was his cardio was pretty poor. I think after the fourth, fifth round, he was blowing, mouth was wide open, gulping in air. So if it goes kind of deep, which I don't think it will, because I don't know. I don't really rate him for some. When you see a guy and he doesn't really impress you, and he just goes down your pecking order of like talent-wise, he's just down. Like I can't see him like being competitive against Wilder, to be honest, especially on short notice.
Well,
yeah, he's a heavyweight; he doesn't have to make a weight, but still.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that as well because Washington doesn't necessarily do anything especially flashy, or he doesn't necessarily do anything where you're like, wow, like this guy is amazing. Like he's such a hard hitter, or he's so good with the side steps, or he's so good on his feet. I think he's pretty much a good all-around fighter, though. I've seen film of him like training and such, and just what he's been able to pull off in the ring by and large as well. I mean, I thought that he's been able to handle guys that probably should have otherwise given him a bit more difficulty with relative ease. And I think that he's able to step up to the level of his competition. I think that he'll be able to step up further against Wilder too. I do favor Wilder to win this fight, especially considering the knockout threat is always there. But I don't necessarily count Washington out. I think he can give him a lot of trouble.
Okay, just a few things on the cards that occurred on the weekend. We didn't mention Selby's opponent apparently having hepatitis C, but then he was saying that he got retested and he didn't have it. There's a bit of confusion going on there. Did you hear anything
that's interesting.
else?
I mean, I heard about it. I heard that he had failed his medical exam, and then I heard afterwards that it might have been like hepatitis. It might have been not necessarily hepatitis C, but it might have been because there's like 3 different types of hepatitis, but the thing is some of them you can actually contract by eating like contaminated food and such, and then it's like it'll work its way out of your body. So it's entirely possible that he might have gotten a certain, like maybe hepatitis B, for instance, and from eating something that was bad. And, it's almost like getting a flu. It's like it'll be in there and you'll be sick for the moment and then it'll be out of your system. Even Evander Holyfield actually had that into his third fight with, was it his third fight or his second fight? I think it was probably his third fight against Riddick Bowe, where he had contracted that, in spite of the fact that he was able to compete in spite of that. But as for Barros, I mean, it's kind of a shame because, Selby's been out of the ring for a long time. It would have been nice to see him again. And I think that Barros probably could have given him at least a reasonable challenge in terms of a fight. He's a guy that, he had lost to primarily big names, Caballero, Mikey Garcia, etc. But I think he could have at least been a fairly good opponent and a good comeback opponent for Lee Selby. So it's really a shame that it didn't happen. But I did see Abner Mares over there calling Selby out, saying that it'd be a great fight. It looked pretty funny because Selby's so much taller than Mares. It's like it looked like a third grader calling out a fifth grader to a fight on the schoolyard playground or something. It was pretty amusing.
That'd be a good unification if that could happen.
Yeah, I think it'd be excellent. Great, one of the great matchups that are possible at the featherweight division at the moment.
Yeah. Okay, on the HBO on the card, Tyrone Johnson was supposed to be on there, but Doug Fisher was saying that he was 4 pounds over, but I've scoured the internet. I can't see any reports that he weighed in 4 pounds over, so I don't know what was going on. Did you hear anything?
Wait, which fighter was that?
Toriano Johnson. He was supposed to be on the undercard of the HBO.
Actually, no, I didn't. I didn't pay especially close attention to that particular situation. But I mean, yeah, if he was 4 pounds over, that's not good. But it just goes to show some of these fighters, they're trying to drain too much, take too much out of their bodies. It's entirely possible that the man may have either just made a miscalculation during his camp, or he may have gotten sick. I mean, we saw that with Mikey Garcia, even in the one of the 2-day specials that they did with him. He caught the flu, he missed weight against Juanma Lopez. And they managed to go through with that fight, but considering Johnson doesn't have a belt or anything, he doesn't necessarily have big money behind him or an HBO date, for instance, centered around him at least. They probably figured it was better to just scrap it all together, and his opponent might have had something to do with it as well. But Johnson is pretty much in line for a title shot probably sometime in the near future. They've been talking about him and Golovkin for the longest time, so I'd very well imagine him as like a stay busy opponent for the winner of Golovkin Jacobs or something in the near future.
Yeah, maybe you got hepatitis C or something. Who knows?
Yeah, potentially.
Okay, another fight that was announced during the week: Jared Hurd versus Tony Harrison. I think that's a really good fight on the Wilder undercard.
Very good, very good. The Tony Harrison. Say what you want about him. The man can punch. The man can absolutely punch. Jared Hurd is a guy that can be hit. I thought Jojo Dan was able to hit him a good bit. I thought Oscar Molina was able to hit him a good bit, in spite of the fact that he was able to generally control the pace of both of those fights and take both of them out eventually. But Harrison's a different animal. I think Jared Hurd definitely has to be on his P's and Q's in terms of his boxing skill and his defensive acuity. And we really see what he's got. I thought Harrison was beating what's his name, Willie Nelson, up until Nelson managed to just catch him and KO him. It's entirely possible Harrison just may be one of those kill or be killed type fighters where he's either going to knock you out or get knocked out. Harrison definitely has power of his own, a good amount of punch variety, and I just think this is a solid matchup, a solid fight, but a dangerous one. And if Hurd comes through and is able to show off some of that defensive capability and avoid Harrison's bombs and manage to KO Harrison along with being able to outclass him in terms of skills, I think that'll speak extremely well for Jared Hurd, and it'll probably speak to the fact that he might be ready for the championship level if he's able to do something like that.
Yeah, I'm high on Hurd. I've seen him a few times. For you again, Kemo's got a beautiful uppercut. And it's a really good fight between, it's the type of fights we've not seen in the last few years. Like, these guys will go in different directions and then somehow get a title shot. But Harrison, like you said, against Nelson, he was kind of winning the fight and started to tire and got clipped and lost it. But since then, he kind of schooled Rebchenko. He beat also, what was his name? His name escapes me now. Fernando Guerrero. The only thing about Harrison, I don't know if you agree, Neota, he needs to stop wearing shades indoors. It's not a good look.
I don't know, man. Maybe that might speak to some eye problems or something. But,
he's styling on everyone.
Yeah. Sometimes I wear shades indoors just because, I don't know, like ambient light kind of bothers me. Like if I'm in a mall or something, like all the lights from all the stores on the side, it kind of bugs me out. So
you're walking through the mall with stunner shades on.
That's right, stunning on everybody. The number one, like Birdman back in the day.
Another fight that was announced: Sam Eggington versus Paulie Malignaggi on the David Haye Tony Bellew undercard. Pretty shit fight, to be honest. I don't really want to see Paulie fight. I hope Eggington blasts him out.
Not sure that's gonna happen though, man. It seems like Malignaggi is almost like on a. Like he's like a leisure boxer right now. He's like a leisurely boxer. He's like semi-retired. He's just
going on his world tours. That's what they used to do. They were kind of they'd go around the world and just collect money, weren't they?
Yeah, pretty much. He's just doing it. He has a big enough name. A lot of people know him, from his commentary, even more so than his boxing by and large, probably nowadays, considering the fact that he's been a pretty high premier level commentator the last couple of years, whereas since the Broner fight, he hasn't really been a high level boxer, or at least since the Porter fight anyway. But I mean, yeah, he's pretty much just trying to pick on fighters that he probably knows that he can beat. There was him talking about fighting Ricky Burns as well. I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing that fight as long as he gets past this next one. And they got Burns versus Ndongo on deck, and I think that's going to be a solid fight. It'll be really interesting to see just how deep Julius Ndongo's will happens to be. And I think Malignaggi versus the winner of that fight is very compelling.
Malignaggi can't make 140 though.
He probably can. At least not healthy. But I think he'll probably do it. Just to try and get a belt once more. But yeah, if anything, I'd favor either of those guys over him just by virtue of that specifically. Because it's like he'd have to really cut down like nobody's business. I even remember back when he fought Juan Diaz those couple times, because those fights I think were at like a catch weight of 138.5 or something like that. And I remember just wonder, I was like, damn, there's not an ounce of fat on Paulie. You could see every freaking, he had like an 8-pack at that weight class. You know what I mean? And so I was like, damn, he's probably struggling to even make 140 as it is. So it didn't surprise me when he moved up to 147, in spite of the fact that he's not like a physical like manhandler or a big puncher or anything. So yeah, I'd agree with you in that regard.
Yeah, and quickly we were talking about ESPN's new link-up with Golden Boy. They announced their first card match, 23rd, headlined by Jason Quigley versus Glenn Tapia. Not a bad fight, to be honest, to kick off their relationship.
Yeah, not bad at all. Tapia's a known name, and get Quigley in there, gets the known name, try to build him up a bit more, and we'll see what he's really got. Tapia's still a rugged veteran fighter now at this point, and we'll really see as a gauge as to what Quigley has in the well. Definitely. Randy Caballero's on that fight too, or on that card too, rather.
Who's he fighting?
Which is good. It's good to see him back in action. He's fighting Victor Proa. Victor Proa, I remember he fought Joseph Diaz Jr. He got stopped by him. So this is really like a comeback fight for Caballero, step down from where he had been before. He had been a champion at 118. But I think it's really a matter of trying to see if he can make the 122-pound division, considering how widely he missed 118 for that fight that he was supposed to have against Haskins. And then he was 124 in his last fight. So I think really this fight is more about checking to see if he can make weight healthy.
They probably
and even if he can't, then he'll still be able to handle this guy with relative ease.
They'll have to probably renegotiate the day before and make it at 126.
Yeah, double pros for purse from, I don't know, maybe $7,000 to 14 or something.
Exactly. Okay, that's about it news-wise, unless you got anything else that you've seen that you want to add.
I'm trying to think. I'm looking at some headlines right now. I think we covered most of it.
Yeah, I do try and do my research.
Well, I might as well make mention of this because it happened. I think it might have happened a little over a week ago, but nobody ever managed to talk about it. Carlos Cuadras is going to be on the undercard of Golovkin-Jacobs along with Chocolatito versus Hisakitsu Rungvisai. Rungvisai, of course, being the man that Cuadras beat to get that WBC title, which Cuadras then lost closely to Chocolatito. But he's going to be fighting David Carmona, who is the only fighter to go 12 rounds with Naoya Inoue. So I think that fight especially will really be able to put a good measuring stick on exactly who is the best fighter at 115 pounds. Because if Cuadras is able to actually stop Carmona where Inoue failed to, or is able to, at the very least, defeat him conclusively in like a 9-3 or better manner, I think he and Chocolatito may actually have an argument for both being better than Inoue, considering that. Because Inoue was hitting this guy with everything. He wasn't able to get him out of there. He was able to rock him really badly in the last round and drop him, but he wasn't able to finish him. And Carmona gave Inoue quite a bit of trouble, and just in terms of being, like I kind of mentioned before, just being a rugged fighter that roughed him up on the inside, threw a lot of good body shots, wasn't necessarily the biggest puncher. But, I mean, he just gave Inoue trouble with the fact that he just wasn't going away and he wasn't going to be intimidated by Inoue's power. So if Cuadras is able to do something emphatic against him, I think that'll say a lot for Cuadras, and it'll say a lot for him in terms of getting that rematch with Chocolatito that he so anxiously desires.
Oh, I just remember during the week, your boy, the strawweight fought, I'm not going to try and pronounce the name, Methanonium?
Oh, yeah, Wenheng Manayoten.
There we go.
Yeah. A pretty easy victory for him, aka Kayapan Munsuri. Or actually, what am I talking about? I'm thinking about the Khan's fight again. No. This actually was a pretty hard fight for him. He fought Melvin Jerusalem. Jerusalem of the Philippines. That's where I mixed up him and Joran Akaz. But honestly, I thought Jerusalem almost beat him. Like it was that close of a fight. I thought basically what saved Wenheng was the fact that Jerusalem got deducted a point for a low blow against Manayoten, and honestly, I thought the referee was premature in deducting that point from him. Because, normally with referees, especially when they're going to warn you for low blows or for any kind of foul, even like spitting out the mouthpiece, for instance, they'll warn you maybe at least twice, and then they'll deduct a point. With that, it's like he warned Jerusalem once, and then he immediately deducted a point the very next round when he hit Wenheng with a low blow. But it didn't look like it was anything really intentional. It really just looked like a matter of they were both throwing combinations, Jerusalem was in a low position. Wenhang was like almost kind of bouncing backwards, but like almost in the air, and he just hit it. He caught him like on the thigh, like on the upper thigh, with a left uppercut. But you could tell that it was something that was really meant to hit him in the body. But I didn't agree with that. But I think that Jerusalem is probably a dude that really deserves a rematch with Wenhang, if not at the very least a shot at one of the other titles. Maybe they could get him in there against knockout CP Freshmont, since he already had a good showing in Thailand, maybe fight the other Thai world champion. But I mean, I thought Wenhang definitely looked vulnerable in there. And it leads me to believe that Jose Argumedo, a fighter that's managed by the same manager as Canelo Alvarez, he's managed by Eddie Reynoso, Chepo's son, as well as being promoted by Golden Boy Promotions, we might be able to see potentially a unification or something of that sort between Argumedo and either Wenhang or Knockout CP Freshmont, maybe on one of these Canelo undercards coming up soon. And honestly, I think I might favor Argumedo against everybody else in the division. I think that his overall style, the fact that, in spite of the fact that he's kind of wild with his shots, he has kind of that good type of wildness. He has, almost that Mayorga in his prime sense about him, where he's throwing shots at all angles, viciously, coming right at you. And the thing is, like, he'll almost utilize clinches really well, and he'll utilize his feet really well on the outside, kind of trip you up, make you think that he's about to advance on you, then kind of move around the ring, and then all of a sudden, when you reset your feet in order to get your shots off at him, he's throwing punches at every angle. But I mean, once again, Wenhang got a victory, 45-0 now. He actually might wind up beating both Floyd and Chocolatito to that 50-0. He might, because he normally fights 4 times a year, and if he holds true to that for 2017, he'll be 48-0 by the end of the year, if he keeps on his winning ways. So. We might be seeing the new TBE at some time in the near future.
The new TBE that nobody knows.
Yeah, man.
All right, now let's preview next week. There's a few cards, but quality-wise, it's pretty low. Thursday, I think, return of Sammy Vasquez versus Luis Collazo on a PBC card on, I think it's Fox Sports.
Yeah, Fox Sports 1.
Yeah, both guys coming off a loss. Like, Collazo fought way back. He's not fought since the Thurman fight. And Vasquez lost last year to my boy Diaz.
Felix Diaz.
Felix Diaz. These guys, both southpaws. I don't know, it's not really a fight I'm too up for, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I mean, stylistically, you can't necessarily see it being a barn burner, although it may wind up turning out to be, just by virtue of the fact that they may wind up kind of canceling each other out technically, and it may kind of devolve into more of a will over skill type of affair. Luis Collazo is a pretty tricky fighter. I think he tends to have probably a slightly better inside game than Sammy Vasquez, but Vasquez has good range at mid-range and long range, and he has really good volume of his own. I think that Vasquez, I don't know, he really didn't look right against Felix Diaz. He looked like he might have been drained or something, but I mean, you got to give credit to Diaz for managing to kind of push him and manhandle him as well. Luis Collazo, in spite of the fact that he's not necessarily a big puncher, is a pretty physical. He kind of brute forces you in the ring a little bit. So, he may be able to do some of that same thing that Diaz did against Vasquez. But overall, I think Vasquez, just being the younger, fresher fighter, and I think having a little bit more overall like viability, and a little bit more punch variety, probably a little bit more stamina, unless he comes in looking drained again. I think that he probably should beat Collazo. I think that's probably what it's really meant to do, just kind of really get a gauge as to if Vasquez might become an opponent in the future, or if they're going to, reinvest in him, basically.
Yeah, I think that point's excellent. They're kind of testing the water. Do we put more money in this guy, or just start making him a kind of gatekeeper, even though he never
making him food?
Yep, exactly. Next one, Friday, we have the return of
Felix Fajardo.
He's fighting in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Oliver Flores. Have you seen much of this dude, Naoto?
Primarily what I've seen of Flores is him getting knocked out in 2 rounds by Miguel Berchelt, and then him getting knocked out in 3 rounds by Takashi Uchiyama.
So, knockout memories.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound too good for him, to be honest.
Not really, but at the same time, I think a lot of this is really just they're trying to gauge where Verdejo is at. He had that really terrible car accident. He might be lucky to still be boxing, really.
Was it
if that accident
motorcycle
turned out
accident?
different. No, motorcycle accident. You're right. So that even more so, he had that bad accident. Look at Paul Williams. Those things can turn out a lot worse. Even the guy from Bleed for This, Vinny Pazienza, could turn out a lot worse even in a car, where you actually have some cage around you as opposed to a motorcycle.
Yep.
If anything, Verdejo he's never really struck me as a knockout puncher. He was knocking a lot of guys out early in his career when he was fighting guys that were way overmatched, way oversized, just completely outmatched in every regard. Flores, outside of those two fights at the championship level versus Berchelt and Uchiyama, has pretty much managed to win every other fight and, show himself to probably be a fairly solid, journeyman level fighter. So if anything, he may give Verdejo a tough fight, or, Verdejo may be able to show some of that power that a lot of people have been wishing that he's shown at the top level, and may be able to get Flores out of there. If he's able to get Flores out of there early, the same way that Berchelt and Uchiyama did, then, they may really have something. He may really be back in form and back in better form than he had been, previously. Who knows? Maybe he was resting on his laurels previous to that accident, and maybe after rehabbing and getting back into shape, maybe he's going to come back stronger than he ever has before. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how it turns out.
Yeah, in his last couple of fights before the accident, he's shown a lack of adjustments. Like, he'd fight guys there who were just going back in straight lines and trying to counter him, and he wasn't really adjusting. He wasn't really putting face.
He reminded me of Zhou Shiming a lot. The way he fought.
Just kept doing the same thing, even if it wasn't working. But they were saying if Terry Flanagan gets through this fight with Petrov, he's got in a couple months, then Verdejo is mandatory, and I don't know. I'd kind of favour Flanagan, even though he's not looked too good in the last couple of fights either. I think he's got a bit more experience. It'd be a good time to catch Verdejo because he's still a bit green, but it'd still be a good fight.
Still a bit green. Who knows? Maybe he has like some lingering issues from the accident and such. Maybe some stamina issues potentially. Like that thing. It can do a number on your joints, on your body, on your muscles, etc. When you get into an accident like that. Like similar to the way when people get knocked out. It's a similar dynamic that happens to your body physiologically. But that's some of Flanagan wins though, because I think the Peter Petrov fight is actually a really tough fight for Flanagan. But even if Petrov wins that fight, I think if anything stylistically, he actually may be tougher for Verdejo. He has that nonstop aggressive style. He's going to keep coming at you. He's almost like a mini Provodnikov. Not too much mini because he's only a weight class or a weight class and a half below where Provodnikov is, but similar overall style. But I think Flanagan is a pretty physical fighter himself. So either one of those fighters, in that fight, really I see is kind of a 50-50 between Flanagan and Petrov. But I think either one of those guys is a very, very difficult opponent for Verdejo. But if anything, I'd say that either one of those guys would probably be the most beatable for Verdejo at the championship level at lightweight at the moment. I wouldn't favor Verdejo over, or really give him much of a chance versus Easter, Garcia, or Linares.
Yep. Again, another one of my favourite divisions, 135. Moving on. Just want to clarify, because when they first announced this pay-per-view, ITV did in the UK, initially they said the undercard was going to be on a free channel called ITV4, and then the main event, Chris Eubank Jr. versus Renald Quinlan for the IBO super middleweight title, was going to be on box office, which you'd have to pay for. But I've seen some tweets this week, and they've confirmed that basically the whole card is going to be box office, which makes more business sense, because the undercard isn't too bad, so why you would give that away for free and then ask people to pay for one fight, which is pretty poor. It didn't make sense, but business-wise, I think they've done better there. But overall, still not a great pay-per-view. ITV back in the boxing game. We discussed it in previous shows, and I'm not going to go over it again. But just on the fight itself, I was joking with Leon a couple of weeks ago when we watched that ITV4 card, and it was basically a preview show for this fight, and the footage they had of Quinlan was like a stream. Like, this is how poor it was. Like, they couldn't get any legit HD content. They had to just like.
I was gonna say, I was just gonna ask you if it was in HD, if it was a clean stream or if it was all choppy. It's like it's at 2 minutes and 59 seconds or 2 minutes and 52 seconds in round 2, and then it chops up, and then it all of a sudden it's 1 minute and 42 seconds into round 2. Like, wait a minute, what happened in the last minute?
I don't even think it was in like 16:9. I'm sure it was like in 4:3.
Ouch! Damn, taking it back, man. 244p or something.
Exactly. Yeah, I watched a bit of Quinlan today on one of those streams that we're talking about, but basically, he's not that good, man. He's like heads up.
Alright, he's the IBO champion. How dare you disrespect him like that?
That is true. Maybe I should give him more respect. But yeah, his chin's up in the air. His left hand's
respect on his name.
His left hand's pretty low. And he falls short with his jab quite often. He is a big dude though. Like BoxRec don't list his height, but the opponent I watched him against, unless that guy's a midget, like Quinlan is a big dude. But I think Eubank plays with him for like 2 rounds and then just smashes him out because. It's a difficult one. You don't want to stretch it out, and people are thinking, well, Eubank's playing with his food, and you don't really want to blast him out in the first round because people are going to feel short-changed that dipped into the pockets and paid the pay-per-view money. So I think he'll mess about for a few rounds and just easily take him out. So
yeah, play with his food, and then finish off the meal after maybe 4 or 5, something like that.
Yeah, you got anything you want to
add? Not too much outside of the fact that I know that. Our boy Kid Galahad is going to be fighting Joseph Agbeko on the undercard. Finally off of that long suspension. He should probably take care of business against Agbeko. Agbeko hasn't really been the same since the second Mars fight in particular. And Galahad is a pretty solid prospect, and we'll really see if where he's at now, coming back, and if he could potentially be a factor in the next couple of years at 122 or 126.
Yeah, I'm a big Galahad fan, and I was disappointed when he got popped for the PEDs. But he has been back now. He fought 3 times last year because his suspension got reduced, which wasn't officially announced why, but most people suspected he did some snitching, got some time took off.
Okay. I got you. Yeah, I hadn't even realized that he had already had comeback fights.
Yeah, but the opponents were just terrible. It was just basically him trying to get kind of fighting weight, just kind of getting back in shape. So opponent-wise, it was terrible. But this is his
well, at least he has a name now ahead of him, And Agbeko has at least gotten a couple wins under his belt, in the last year or 2. So we'll see what it is.
Yeah, a few good fights on that undercard. You got Adam Etchers from, I think he's from Sheffield. Adam Etchers. Let me just check. Yeah, he is. He's fighting John Ryder, so I think that'd be a decent fight. 12 round for the vacant IBF international belt, one of those bullshit belts. And David Price is on.
But fairly evenly matched, it seems like.
Yeah, John Ryder a couple of losses. Etchers, he was doing quite well until they put him against the beast that is Sergey Kamitsi, and he iced him. So he's had a few fights since then, kind of rebuilt a bit. So he's definitely got a decent power. I just think he's a bit open and a bit easy to hit at times. But John Ryder, he's not looked too good in his last few fights as well. He kind of got schooled on the back foot against Jack Anfield in his last fight. But he did beat Kamitsi, so it's one of those fights. He beat him, he lost to him. So we'll see. Not like I said, not a bad undercard fight to be honest. And David Price, he's on the undercard against Christian Hammer. I don't know. David Price, what can we say about him? There's always that suspicion that some dude's just going to clock him clean and night. But
it's kind of unfortunate. Well, who was the guy that knocked him out and then he tested positive for it's like a straight up steroid or HGH or something like that?
Yeah, Eric Tepo.
Yeah, there we go, Eric Tepo. That was ugly, man. got that ped knockout, man. That was an ugly one.
If I was Price, I'd just get some advertising on my shoes, on the sole. Because if you do get knocked out, at least you're getting paid.
Yeah. I remember one time looking at the Lunsdale website because I wanted to buy some Lunsdale running shorts and stuff. Because me, I like to collect all the different brands of boxing apparel and stuff. Wear them when I'm working out and such. And I remember seeing David Price on the phone, like why the hell they got this dude that keeps getting knocked out as like their spokesman? Because it like had stuff like saying like, oh, Price's picks. Like, so if I wear like his stuff, am I gonna get knocked out like him too? Like, damn.
You inherit his glass jaw.
Yeah, it's a no. It's a no go, man.
Yeah. So that card's not too bad, but I won't pay for it.
I see Andrew Selby on there too.
Oh yeah, Selby's on there. I don't know, his opponent looks like he's got quite a few losses though, so I don't know how competitive it's going to be. The thing about Selby is they can move him faster than that. I don't know. Like every guy he's come up against has caused him no issues at all. So
yeah, I don't know. They may be a little bit more tentative with him considering what happened to dude that fought John Real Casimero. His name is escaping me at the moment.
Charlie Edwards.
Charlie Edwards. There we go. Yeah, they thought that he was gonna just nick a belt, like Eddie Hearn nicks a bird, and he got nicked. He got beat down and punished.
That's the problem about nicking. Either you get nicked or you nick something. Like there's no in between.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. Your boy Haki Butler, he's back in South Africa against Joey Kanoi, and Rano Liedenberg versus Erico calling the rematch. That's on the same card. Yeah, I mean,
Heki Butler, he's moved up to 108 since he had that terrible loss, 26-1 loss to Barão Rojas. But Rojas showed himself to be definitely a tough customer. After that, even he ran knockout CP Freshmont to a near draw. That was another extremely close fight. I wouldn't count out somebody like Rojas against Wenheng Manayothin either. He's got that swarming, high volume, 1,000 punches a fight style. That could give anybody trouble. And that's pretty much what gave Butler trouble. I think that was the perfect style to use against somebody like Butler. Otherwise, I still think Butler is definitely a top-level operator, a very slick fighter, good technical ability, extremely good defensive ability. Kanoi, to me, it seems really just more like, a stay-busy opponent, a guy that's not really a top-level fighter. Just another fight to get Butler back in, a little bit higher in the rankings, keep him busy basically, and see if he could potentially challenge for another title at 108 instead of 105 this time. But except at 108, I mean, considering the guys who rule the roost there, unless he's going to fight for that IBO title, which the IBO was based in South Africa, he's going to have a tough road, because you got the WBO champion Kosei Tanaka, who we mentioned in our recap of the New Year's card, is an absolute beast. Akira Higashi is a guy that's always going to let you know that you're in a physical fight, the type of fight that Butler seems not to really want. He tends to be more of a finesse fighter. Ryoichi Taguchi, a very tall fighter who might be able to negate Butler's slickness with just by virtue of height and reach. And Ganigan Lopez, who's, another, tall guy, lanky guy, but a guy that fights on the inside extremely well too. So I think any which way he goes at light flyweight, it's going to be a really difficult time for Butler stylistically.
Yep, and just lastly, there's a card in Australia on Friday. Anthony Modine versus Danny Green rematch at 83 kilogram catchweight. Don't think anybody cares, to be honest. Also on
that rivalry is old. That rivalry is so old, man.
I think that's pay-per-view. Bill, my boy Bill from New Zealand, I think he was saying that's pay-per-view down there. Wow. So that's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's incredible.
On the undercard, son of the legendary
Costa Tszyu.
Tim Tszyu's making his second professional appearance, so yeah. Everyone else I don't really know on the undercard, but it's probably just prospects from Australia, and that's about it from me, Naota.
Yeah, well, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how the son of pretty much a legend, all-time great, definitely, especially at 140 pounds, Costa Tszyu, Tim Tszyu. So let's see how he does. See if he maybe has some of that fire of his pops. If he has even half of it, I think he'll be definitely a fun fighter to watch. But, I mean, I can't necessarily think of too much more to talk about in terms of news or views or previews or anything like that. So,
excellent. Thank you for your time, Naota. Let's give a quick shout to all the people in the chat. We got Beats Boxing, Johnny B86, Loco Mexican, Court Music, BRD Hey, Mr. Dermo, Beast Mode, and the new Scores Fam, which is my boy Scorsese. J3 the A-side, Nunez 83, Kevlar, Jas, Jason 268, Shams 1012 guests. Thank you to all you guys. Thank you to all the people that download the show week in, week out, and we'll be back next week. Peace.
You just listened to the Boxing Coalition.
Oh, dude, man, I love boxing. I fucking love boxing.
A big shout out to the Boxing Coalition.
You're a newbie.
No, I ain't new, man.
If my fucking next door neighbour became the #1 flyweight in the world, you know what I'd do? I'd fucking walk past the cunt.
Derek, how you doing, bro?
I was physically banging you, blood.
I disagree.
First time I hear the show, man, it was fucking badass.
Vamos a Argentina, la concha de su madre.
I see the bomb in them.
I get home and she's like, what the fuck? Me and the kid are here. Why don't you get home and talk to us? I'm like, man, you guys don't know shit about boxing.
Kel, how does it feel to be the new IBF champion?
It feels great. Did we really dive into the black hole right off the jump?
I think he's hiding glass. Just to play devil's advocate.
You want 1 portion of crow or 2 portions of crow?
Give me 2 portions with a supersized fries and a large drink, please.
I can't stand him, what? I'm Scottish.
Cringe side?
But you won't rush Anthony fucking fat ass Joshua, would you?
He's not fat.
How about you tell us what you weighed for your final thoughts?
My weight?
Thank you for listening to the Boxing Coalition. We are live every Monday, 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. UK time, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern.